Episode 9. Today I thought I would just give you a book review. So I both read books on Kindle and also physical books still, but I've also taken to using Audible recently. And this book that I want to talk to you about today is one that I would strongly suggest that you listen to on Audible. So I just finished up Extreme Ownership with Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. It is the story and leadership lessons from two U.S. Navy SEALs who talk about the things that they have seen in exceptional leadership in their time in the military, serving in Iraq and I believe also, mainly just Iraq. The book is interesting. It's not one that I would typically pick up just in terms of the kind of war stories side of it. But in terms of listening to it as an audio book, it really bridges the gap between a business book and almost a historical documentary type narrative, because what you have is Leif Babin and Jocko Willink talking about actual scenarios that happened to them in Ramadi, Iraq, and soldiers getting injured, situations of friendly fire, coming under fire from enemy attack, all sorts of these different scenarios, and it's extremely dramatic. When you listen to it, it's not so much just hearing about the leadership lessons that are learned, but there's also a storytelling aspect of it that it makes it really, really compelling, and I think it works really well as an audiobook, hearing it from the voice of the two authors. So strongly recommend you listen to it as an audiobook. But addressing the core concept of the book, extreme ownership, this is something that I believe very, very firmly in. In my work, coaching on leadership, in the book I'm writing about leadership, one of the key principles is about taking full accountability and ownership. And that's not to say that you don't allow your people to make mistakes or that you take every one of their mistakes as your own, but it does put you in the position where whatever happens, you give yourself some measure of influence and control in it by taking ownership and looking at yourself at how you could have done better and the different things that you could have done to have achieved a different outcome. The book Extreme Ownership, I won't give away what's going on in it because it's a really, really worthwhile read. Even for those of you who may not be into books that have any sort of connection to war or fighting or anything like that. That's not my thing either. But the book is a phenomenal series of lessons about not just the environment of war, but they nicely take those and at the end of each chapter move them into the world of business because after leaving the military, and starting civilian life, Jocko and Leif started, I believe it's called Echelon Front, which is their consulting company for leadership. And they work with leaders across all different industries and work with them on their leadership lessons. And they take the same principles that they used in tense, aggressive, fighting, war-like scenarios, and they bring them into the world of business. And while I don't think that the metaphor of war is always appropriate in business, I think there is a lot of value to be gained from looking at it in similar situations. Looking at your competitors as potentially as enemies from time to time can be helpful. Thinking about your team going into battle. All of those sort of ideas can be very, very useful. And if you can imagine yourself taking these lessons learned under the fog of war, so to speak, and the importance of them in those settings, it shows you just how well they should be able to work in a much more relaxed and calm setting such as the boardroom. Highly recommend you pick up the book, highly recommend you do it on Audible, and I highly recommend that you look for ways where you can begin to take more ownership in your own life, in your own leadership, so that you have more control in how you react to situations by not feeling like things are happening to you, but that you're an active participant in the results that you get. I think it's a great leadership for anybody who's leadership lesson for anybody that's looking to grow themselves and the abilities of their teams is to understand these concepts of extreme ownership. And then at the very end of the Audible book, they also go into a little bit of the dichotomy of leadership, which talks about the balance of different aspects of leadership, such as being too strict versus being too lenient, or being too friendly versus being too distant with your team members. So all of these things are also really great lessons. Strongly recommend that you pick up both books, The Dichotomy of Leadership and Extreme Ownership. In the Audible book I had, there was a big section on the dichotomy of leadership in the last chapter. So either way, pick up both books. They're really great. Big shout out to Jocko and Leif for putting together such a great book that has so many valuable lessons in it. It's definitely going to be one that I read more than once. Pick it up.